Hello and welcome to this Horus Heresy hobby video. Today we are looking at heralds and or standard bearers. So having played a few games of Horus Heresy, I have obviously met the line mechanism for controlling objectives. So for context, for those who don't know, only units who have the line keyword, which are most of the troops, not all of them, and some of the other units, or you can do special rights of war to make other things line and so on. Basically, only troops with the line keyword can take objectives and score. Now, it's obvious why they do that, because GW doesn't want you to just take two troops as attacks and then fill up on Terminators and other things and all the big powerful toys. But that affects the way I play, because I prefer to have loads of infantry and troops and things. So, for me, I've been scratching my head thinking, right, how do I get more line into my force? Because yes, I want to take lots of sort of core troops, but also there are other units that I want. This is cat's belly that I want to be able to hold objectives and so on as well, because I sort of see them as being able to do that from a narrative perspective, so I want to be able to play that out. So the biggest mechanism for that I have been able to see and or find is the Legion standard. And I also think that fits Ultramarines quite well, because there will, after the Calth atrocity, there will be lots of standards kicking about. So there'll be the ratio of standards to Marines will be higher in the post-Calth era. So the easiest thing was this model. So there's the Mark III command set in that Forge World as was sold. It comes with this and this guy. They come in a set. I'm going to use him as a Centurion Delegatus. I can't remember how it's pronounced. Basically, he's going to be the general for smaller armies, warlord for smaller armies. So this guy works quite well, except with him being the Legion doodah, with him being a herald, I sort of almost want to differentiate between she's drinking out of the paint pot. That's why what you can hear the water pot. The water is fresh because I've just sat down to do a video and some painting. Anyway, I sort of in my mind I want to differentiate between sort of big Legion standards and company standards. I think company standards can be relatively unadorned, relatively speaking, you know, a big sort of Ultima symbol and maybe a couple of other bits. But where I think something is representing a Legion standard or a chapter standard, you know, a significant one, I want them to be a bit flashier. So my plan, other than carrying on whilst being completely catted, I have a few different plans for a few different things, and I thought they might make a good video. So, the first thing I've done is taken one of the banners off my transfer sheet. Now, unfortunately, these don't just fit straight up, but they've got lots of sort of space around the edges to trim to size and shape. So I've cut out the one I wanted, and using a sharp hobby knife, be careful folks, and a metal ruler, I've cut it to shape. I had to do quite a bit of slicing down the sides because I want it to fit in within this this lip, what do you call it, this raised section, which I think I'm going to pick out in gold and then have this on the inside of it. Now, what I've there's a lot of folding in the fabric at the top, so I don't know how well you can see that. Come on, focus on this. There you go. I've cut that with a craft knife to roughly mimic the shape of the top of that. And my hope is, and we'll find out together whether or not this works, my hope is to use microset and microsol to soften the transfer and make it fit those grooves. The other problem to overcome is that the blue on here is gradiated from dark blue to light blue, which is a pain in the behind, but that one is as well. So it didn't matter which one I chose. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to paint it normally, then apply the transfer. Then I'm going to have to do some gradation in the rest of the banner so it doesn't look off. I'm going to play that one by ear. I'll let you know how well that goes. Well, you'll see how well that goes later in the video. For me, that won't be today. That's at some future point, because I know I don't have time to get that far today. Anyway, I digress. So that's going to be a Herald who I can pop with a unit that's sat in the backfield on an objective, make them fearless, make them scoring, and increase the objective capturing potential. Now, I should mention that like the day or so before I've started filming this video, i.e. after I'd assembled all these models I'm going to show you, I say all, there's 3, GW have done their hints for what's to come in 2024, and one of them is almost definitely a Herald. So, you know what they say, timing is everything, eh? But even so. So this is another one. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this one, because this is going to be part of my command squad. I've kit bashed a load of my old 4th ed pieces with some Mark 6 Marines to make a command squad. I'm going to cover that in a separate video. This is just a banner pole from an old Mark 7 or 8. Mark 7. 40k, original 40k era power armor. And the reason I've gone this way around, because I could have done different patterns of armor. The reason I've chosen the Corvus is the arms from the kit bash are much closer to the arms that you get on the Corvus. They don't stand out as much as they would on some of the others. So that's that one. Now, the next one is much more of a challenge, because I want to do a Herald on a bike. And here it is. So, what have I done to get to this? Well, it is basically just a bike. The heavy bolt is glued in because you can't replace the weapons on a character with one of these bikes, only on the unit. All my others are magnetized to be able to give me options. I've also taken a laurel out of my bits box and squished it onto his head, and that's going to get painted green. And there we go, Herald. So I looked at different options for what to do with this arm. I thought maybe a sort of Roman-style standard would work best, because it wouldn't act like a sail impeding his progress. And I looked at how I could kit bash one of those out of pieces that I had. It looked a bit noddy. It did not look great. And so I started looking on the eBays for different options, and I found this, which is one of these. So this is quite an early, I think I must have painted this about 18, 19 years ago, and you can see it always snaps off. This is from the original Blood Angel Honor Guard set, before Honor Guard was a thing that anyone could take in 40k. It was specifically a Blood Angel thing. And there were, you got You got an apothecary, a standard bearer, and a tech marine, and 2 other minis in the set, and they made up your honor guard. Yeah, and they were all jump packed. So, and I happened to see this on eBay, one of these on eBay, and I snapped it up because it was remarkably inexpensive. And then I saw another one that was also, I think they were like £4 each. I was like, oh yes, I am having those. How are they not 30 quid a piece? So I then set about getting it to fit to the model. Now I cleaned this up a bit to try and get it camera ready. Cleaned up the stump, and I discovered what I had done all those years ago was I'd put it on the other hand. The metal arm you got with it. This confused me when I was building this, because I was like, but the arm's the wrong way round. And I couldn't remember replacing it with a plastic arm. It must have been, I must have concluded I could do a better job of putting a banner in the left hand than putting a sword in the right hand. Because what I did is I just took a regular arm, drilled a hole in it, then green stuffed over his fingers on that side so it looked like he had a solid mitt. But you know what? It worked well enough. And that's an assault marine with a standard. And because I got another one, I thought, oh great. So when I eventually do a Praetor with a jump pack, and a command squad with a jump pack, I can use one of these to the other one of these I've got to make the standard. So that's really cool. So then I had a few challenges. I say challenges. This is the Blood Angel one, as was. My initial thought was to try and get rid of all the purity seals, but Oaths of Moment are referenced quite a bit in early Heresy stuff, and some of the early Heresy models do have oath papers wax sealed to them. So whilst I'm not going to go crazy on the Oaths of Moment, I'm not going to take them off all the models. So I thought, yeah, they can stay. Now this has a blood drop on it, but this this sort of ropey thing is 3-dimensional. That's part of the banner. I thought that would be a royal pain to scrape off the whole banner, so I clipped the blood drop off, clipped a bit of it back, and then got a Terminator symbol, icon, that's the word, from my bits box, and glued that on in its stead. I had wondered about that, but then I've got this mini, which is another one of the, come on, boop, focus, there we go. This is a Champion from Forge World, and he had, oh, come on, why are you unfocusing like that? There we go. He has a Crux Terminatus on his shoulder as well. I'll come up with a reason why he's got a skull there another time, but that's a problem for tomorrow's Paul. But that's just right. Okay, so for that reason, Crux Terminatus, reasonable. I didn't want it to be too old. I mean, obviously, Blood Angel Land, this is an old, venerable bit of cloth that's then clamped. The remainder of it is clamped in this this clampy clamp. So I wanted to try and make it a little bit less old and knackered. So I clipped off the scroll from the top, and again from my bits box. This is there was a limited edition metal Space Marine veteran sergeant with White Dwarf, probably about 15-16 years ago, and I had clipped. This was on at the top of his backpack, this Aquila. I'd clipped it off and replaced it with a Blood Angel chalice. It was shortly after some of the newer Blood Angel minis pieces came out, and I was like, oh yeah, I want that. I want him to have a more Blood Angel-y thing on him. So I had that in my bits box. So I replaced the scroll at the top with that. And I think that looks okay. I think it's sufficiently rigid in the in its structure for him to be able to position it sort of so it doesn't catch the wind. That's probably part of the training of being a herald on a bike. So I think I can just about live with that. The difficulty then was actually getting it to fit, because as you can see pretty much from this Marine, I know this isn't the actual arm, but it points straight forward. I was replicating what the actual arm did in fact do, and it points straight forward. So it just wouldn't fit. It would have been about here and just not fit up against the rest of the bike. So I ended up... I had to do two things. One, because, as you can see with this one, it kept snapping off, I had to pin the wrist to the hand to the wrist. So I had to do that one piece of pinning. But then, no matter how much I shaved off the edge of the arm to change the angle of the grip, I couldn't get an angle that would actually work for him to hold. So I then had to cut the above the elbow joint so that I could have the shoulder piece to attach to the torso and to mount the pad on there, and then I could change the orientation of the bottom, and I've got another pin in that way. So there's two pins holding that up. But what that's meant is, because it was really fiddly to get in place, I also managed, it's just touching the handlebar there, so I had another another point to connect it to glue it. I struggled to contrive a way that would let me do it in multi-parts without the risk of it being painted and then it not fitting and me having to do lots of drilling and sawing and totally wrecking the paint job. So I've reluctantly gone for gluing it in place before I paint it. So we will see how well that turns out. Yes, we will. I want to do the banner white to have a bit more colour contrast with a blue symbol on it. But all the ones on the transfer sheet, the majority of the blue ones are either too big or too small. So I'm thinking this can be a company banner, an assault company banner, and maybe I'll put an Ultramar symbol and maybe some assault symbols in the blue so they'll show up on the white, and maybe some numerals. Don't know, I'm going to have to see how that looks. Hopefully it will look sensible and not a bit... But I can just imagine this being a slightly older banner and it having been restored in one of these frames. Yeah, I might do some freehand. I don't know. I'm going to see how it looks once the transfers are on there. But I really would like to do it in the white rather than a blue background. I just think it'll pop a lot more on the model. So there we go. So that's what I've done with building these. And I'm going to get on and try and paint them. So, wish me luck. Okay, so let's look at some results. So the first one is finished. So this is the Herald on the bike. Quite pleased with the laurels on his head, but that's not the important thing. The important thing, obviously, is the banner. So it's a little bit plainer than I'd like. I ummed and ahed a lot with the transfers. I definitely wanted to do it white. I just don't think it would have... I think it would have just blended in. So I was restricted... Come on, camera, focus on the right thing. I was restricted with which transfers I use because there aren't that many blue ones on the sheet. And even with the white ones, there aren't any that are just sort of 50% bigger than that. You could either have one that was, that took up far too much space and didn't look right, or one that's quite small. So what I decided to go for was, I decided to say this basically is the banner of one of the assault companies. And I think that works because I think these bikes would, if they fleshed out what assault companies look like, I think these bikes would be in them, as would the likes of the speeders, as well as the assault marines and all that good stuff. So I took one of the blue Ultramarines words. There were loads. There was Macragge and, you know, and all sorts. I chose it not because of the word, but because of the width it went across. Macragge looked a bit too long. I wanted a bit of white down the edges. So that was purely why I went for that one. And then I wanted an assault symbol. The sheet only has the small assault symbols in blue, so I had to go for a small one. But actually, you know, I think it isn't exactly as I envisaged, but I think it does the job. I think that's a plain and simple assault company banner. And yes, I talked about the fact that it's a little bit ragged and clamped in here, sort of suggests its antiquity. I think, and that doesn't really work with a plain banner, but I think I'll live with that. You don't automatically see from a distance that this suggests it's old. It's just sort of in a clamp, which is practical for flying around, which is why it's the old Blood Angel honor guard thing. And yeah, so that's that one. That's the success we had with that one, and quite pleased. Now, here we have the Herald on foot. So it's a little bit shinier than I expected, but that's because it's a massive solid block of colour, which is okay. It's okay. You don't notice it too much on the table. Even though this isn't finished, I have had this on a practice game because I think it's definitely finished enough to warrant playing it. In about 2007, I made a New Year's resolution to never play with an unpainted model, and I've kept it. But this is painted, it's just not finished. So, a couple of things about how it went. One thing I discovered was that a big transfer like this does not slide when you put it on. And I was facing either, do I peel it off or do I live with it where it is? And I thought I'll live with it where it is, because you should be able to see from the shine, I don't know if you can, that it isn't all the way down into the V at the bottom, which is what I'd cut it to fit. But it's a bit further up, and the colour matches well enough. You really can't tell at a distance. You only can tell if you know it's there and you look for it. So that's okay. I also decided that because the light blue is just tucked inside the gold trimmings, actually it looks fine. I don't need to blend the outside colour at all, so I'm not even going to bother with that. The one thing I haven't quite decided yet is whether or not I'm going to sort of do the lighter blue up to the very top here, which I might do. Now, what you will see is there are some cracks in here. So what I did was I applied many coats of Microsol to soften it up, and then I very gently, with a new blade, and I used a very fine pointy one, gently ran the blade along the depression to gently break it in between coats of Microsol, so that when it softened, it fitted more closely to the thing. I probably could have done a little bit more around here, and possibly around here, but I decided to quit whilst I was ahead and not do too much for the risk of damaging it. I mean, you can see there's one here I probably could have done a bit more with, but I also thought these are going to be relatively easy to fill in, which is what I'm going to do in a minute. But where it's the cuts would be by the pattern, it's not going to be an easy case of just colour matching it and touching up the gap. So that's another reason I didn't quite do that. But honestly, it does look like it's got the sort of cloth shape from a distance, and I just need to touch up these crack lines. What I might do, and it depends how well it looks when I start to touch it up. If it doesn't look odd, the touch up on these on the cracks, I might darken the depressions a bit more and maybe put a highlight on the top edge just to make it pop a bit. But I'm going to decide whether or not to do that with trial and error. Right then, so Calgar Blue covered beautifully. It was an almost perfect colour match to that light blue at the top. So given that patched up the cracks so well, I decided I'd give it a try, and I did some old school colour blending and took it down with Baharoth Blue and brought it I took it down with Macragge Blue and brought it up with Baharoth Blue, sort of mixing it together on the palette. It's a long time since I've done that. This is the result. So, I just did an edge highlight along a couple of along the main raised ridge there, and the blue bits on the other creases, not trying to go over these other colours. And then I just went in that main crease with the darker colour, just went along the bottom of that, and this is the result. One thing that's niggling me a little bit is I've obviously trimmed the transfer a little bit too short on one side. It's difficult to get an exact measurement and get it exactly right, because I didn't want it flopping over the edge. I thought that'd be more of a pain to correct, although maybe all I would have had to have done is score the knife down the edge and then peel off the strip. So lesson learned there. That might have been a better way to do it, but it's niggling me that we've got a strip of dark blue up to that. But what I think would niggle me more is my trying to blend the Kaldor sky in badly down that little ridge. Although that said, should I give it a go? Blow it. Let's give it a try. Well, that worked. So I basically just started with the Kaldor Blue, went right the way down, and then Macragge Blue to the bottom bit, and then just blended them as I moved it up. I mean, that's what I'm describing is a very grandiose term for just dabbing it on, seeing if it matched, then putting a little bit more of the other colour if it didn't, and re-dabbing. I mean, up close, it doesn't look great, but none of my stuff looks great up close. It's not meant to. I didn't bother to paint the bit down the bottom because they were already matching pretty well. So there we go. And just as I'm about to sign off, the fur monster comes on over. So I hope you've enjoyed this video on heralds. As I said at the start, I anticipate it will soon be overtaken by an actual herald model from GW, but I don't care. I have enjoyed doing them, and I am pretty pleased with what I've done. So I am glad I did it. Yeah, like I said, hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to support me, check out the description of the video. There's things in there you can do. You can do Patreon if you want to. You can use my affiliate link for Element Games if you want to. Or join our shiny hobby Discord, which is nice and chilled out. And yeah, it's great. I like it anyway, but I would say that. But it's also true. Right, that's enough rambling. Bye for now, folks. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.